In these challenging times, how we respond to them can make a huge difference in how we get through them. We can focus on the challenges and what we are losing. We can ask the whys and the what ifs. We can ignore the wise counsel of our leaders. Or we can embrace the challenges and reflect on what we might learn from them. As I've been talking to people this week, praying and reading scripture myself, as well as reflecting, I'm drawn to the practice that the psalmist often employed in the Psalms. Psalm 136 shows off this practice well. Here's Psalm 136, verses 1 through 9. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His faithful love endures forever. Give thanks to the God of gods. His faithful love endures forever. Give thanks to the Lord of lords. His faithful love endures forever. Give thanks to him who alone does mighty miracles. His faithful love endures forever. Give thanks to him who made the heavens so skillfully. His faithful love endures forever. Give thanks to him who placed the earth among the waters. His faithful love endures forever. Give thanks to him who made the heavenly lights. His faithful love endures forever. The sun to rule the day. His faithful love endures forever. And the moon and stars to rule the night. His faithful love endures forever. And then the psalm writer continues, naming the various major events of his people's history. And after each event, he says, God's faithful love endures forever. And after the litany of events and the response, God's faithful love endures forever, the psalm writer concludes the psalm saying, God remembered us in our weakness. His faithful love endures forever. God saved us from our enemies. His faithful love endures forever. He gives food to every living thing. His faithful love endures forever. Give thanks to the God of heaven. His faithful love endures forever. This is a helpful practice to employ in our lives, especially in challenging times when it would be easy to become overwhelmed by the challenges or give in to the fear of the unknown. Remember that God is faithful. The sun will come up tomorrow. Remember that God is present. He has promised to never leave or forsake us. Remember that God provides, sometimes directly and sometimes through the generosity of others. Remember that God has you. Remember that the church is not the building. That's why at Community of Joy we call it a ministry center. The church is you. In these challenging times, we have new opportunities to live into this reality. The opportunities to be the church to each other abound, and they are only limited by our imaginations. We are the church. This Sunday, March 29th, would have been our first 2020 Be a Blessing Sunday, where we suspend our worship gatherings in order to do projects in the community that would bless others. In part, we do this to remind us that the church is not the building, that we, the people, are the church. While we can't gather to do these activities, we can find ways to be a blessing to each other and others in our community. Call a friend. Reach out to a neighbor. If you are going to the store, offer to go for your neighbor. As I said previously, the opportunities are limited only by your imaginations and your desire. This week, while Heather and Emma were serving meals at a housing complex in our community, they learned of 8 senior adults who are food insecure and who are struggling with not wanting to go out of their apartments to expose themselves. And when they do go, they weren't finding what they would need at the store, and that required more trips out. When the need was shared, I decided to contact some connections in the community that we have made since starting the Camden Community Garden. Thanks to those connections, we gave 10 pounds of boneless chicken thigh meat to each senior and to 12 families that are also struggling, for a total of 200 pounds of chicken from Mount Air Farms. Thanks to Greg Twigg from our congregation for transporting it for us, as he works at Mount Air and lives in Salisbury. We also gave them the rest of the kale from my garden. We posted on Facebook and shared in our Zoom prayer time, and $100 came in online, and a Food Lion gift card was shared, and another offered. A friend from our sister church, the Restoration Project, gave me 2 big packages of toilet paper and a package of paper towels. The Maryland Food Bank gave us 8 boxes of canned goods, and I emptied out our food pantry here at the Ministry Center. Friday, through a partnership with Wicomico County Public Schools, we gave out 65 meals to children at the Stone Grove Crossing Community Center and 59 meals at the Newton Street Community Center. We continue to do both locations each week. And we have a Salisbury University physical education professor who is getting his students in online classes to create physical activity packets to give to the children to work on. We also had an art teacher from Pinehurst Elementary who put together from her own supplies at home 45 art packets for the children to use to occupy their bored time. Grace Murdoch and another friend in the community brought coloring books and crayons. So as you can see, the opportunities to be the church abound. It just takes some creative thinking and out-of-the-box thinking to know how to do it. As we remember, I want to encourage you to read the story of Exodus, beginning in the Old Testament book of Exodus 1. Look for the parallels and the learnings that we can find from this story of God's people finding their way out of captivity in Egypt and wandering through the wilderness, arriving at the Promised Land. Our remembering is helped by our ability to find time to reflect. Pause often and think about some questions. First, where have you seen God in your life? List those times. And if you want to write your own psalm after each event you record, write these words: God's faithful love endures forever. Let me just share one event where Pastor Sharon and I saw the hand of God in a way we didn't even expect. Many of you know that for a couple of years we have been looking for a different house, in large part due to a gift of a complete wood shop that I was given just this year. Our realtor had notified us of what she thought was the perfect property that would be coming on the market soon. It looked great. It delayed until just 2 weeks ago, the day before this big shutdown started here, and we got to look at it immediately. We were both grateful that it didn't wow us because of the economic uncertainty of this time now due to COVID-19. While our house is paid for, we weren't sure what impact this pandemic would have on our income level, especially as it relates to my income from the church. So as we look at what could have been, we are grateful for God's intervention, and we trust Him fully. If I were going to write that down, I would write it down if I were going to write it as a psalm, I would write it down and then conclude by saying God's faithful love endures forever. So reflect on your life. Where have you seen God at work in your life? From recent days to long ago. List them out, and after each incident, write, God's faithful love endures forever. Secondly, reflect on what is important about the way you have been living life. As a church, I think what is important is being community. That's what matters out of all of our times of gathering. Connecting with God and connecting with each other. So we are working at ways that we can connect with other people, with each other, while honoring social distance. Unfortunately, these reflections and the songs that we post don't offer near the level of interactivity as we would have if we had gathered on Sunday morning here in worship, because there is no talkback time. You know, I believe that a sermon should be a dialogue, and that is why we have a talkback each week after the sermon. Maybe you could use the comments on the post to engage a little more deeply. As we reflect on what is important and discover new ways to be the community, we found last week that for the 29 of us that joined in the Zoom time of sharing and prayer on Wednesday, that it was so helpful to hear each other's voices and see each other and share what was going on in our lives and needs for prayer. Afterward, I heard again and again how important that was, and that we didn't even realize beforehand the impact it would have on our souls. So to that end, we are offering 2 Zoom gatherings a week, Sundays at 6 p.m. and Wednesdays at 7 p.m. We can have up to 100 people connect, and we have 40 minutes of time free. If you didn't get the Zoom codes I sent out in an email, please reach out and I will send them to you. I'm happy to include any who want to be included in this way of connecting. And if you didn't connect last week, I would highly encourage you to connect this week. In fact, the importance of community is what drove our community Bible study to use Zoom on Wednesday morning to connect and pray. And it's what caused me to reach out this last week to the principal at Pinehurst to offer weekly prayer times for the staff that would want it via Zoom. We have set that up for each Wednesday morning at 8:30 a.m. As we continue to navigate these challenging times, remember and reflect. Remember what God has done in your life, and reflect on those places that you have seen God's provision and presence. One last thing to remember, and that is the Sabbath. Remember the Sabbath. This quarantine is teaching us the value of hitting the pause button. It offers time to reflect and reconnect with God, to reorient our lives around priorities, to place God at the center of our lives, which are all the purposes of the command to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Our culture has busied God right out of our lives, only turning to God in times of need. Remembering the Sabbath makes space for God in our daily life rhythm. Brothers and sisters, I miss you. I love you. And as we remember and reflect together, we will navigate our way through these challenging times with a deepened connection with God and each other. And as always, if you need anything, or there are ways that we can be helpful, please reach out. God bless.
Hi guys, this is Carly, and I'm singing Remember by Lauren Daigle. In the darkest hour, when I cannot breathe, fears on my chest, the weight of the world on me, everything is crashing down. good.